have Oelbaum speaker, very, very close to the Rav for over 50 years, has it been, in the Rabbanis? I had discussed 2 years ago, the good of Florida arranged like a Yom Yun for Rabbanim, one day, a little seminar, and Rav Oelbaum spoke there, and Rav Oelbaum, with decades and decades of experience in Rabbanis, gave us, I think it was 5 points that we should always keep in mind. When I got home, I emailed it to myself, so I remember it, and I chazer every so often just to make sure that I keep things on the level they should be. So it's a big schus for us to hear some words of Torah from Oelbaum. The sponsors for this year tonight are Aaron Shel Pearl in honor of Oelbaum and the Rebbitzin, Rabbi Yehuda Gestein in honor of his father, and the Kornberg family in honor of their parents, David and Sally Frankel. Please.
I can't exactly say that I'm putting Kedushas over here because I've been here once for the Masada Kedushin here, but a number of years ago. But it was not at a Mokem Torah that I was here. But it's very, very gratifying to see that whenever we come to all different parts here in Florida, this place here can continue to grow. They're very, very gratifying to see another Mokem Torah that is budding. We had this chutz many, many times on a yearly basis to have Reb Simcha Wasserman, who was the son of Abu Chona Wasserman. Used to come to New York on a yearly basis. So he once pointed out and said, you know, Chazal many times, especially in Masechet Kedushin, Samachal Bimon, the fact that the Torah is Monachas B'Keren Zovius, which means that the Torah, unfortunately, is pushed into a corner. It's not appreciated. That's the lashon of the Gemara. Torah Monachas B'Keren Zovius. So Simcha said, well, depends. If you have a Keren Zovius on Fifth Avenue, it's worth a lot. So coming to Florida, to me, these areas are like Keren Zovius, and these are very, not simple Keren Zovius. They're worth tremendously amount, and especially we see that this is kind of hard. It goes abroad to be able to be zeicha to continue with halachah to Mam Shavuos HaKodesh. V'smati d'shmayim ruba b'ez Hashem to be zeicha to see great Torah and Tamid Chachamim with all the brachas amurz b'Torah to be accompanied with that. I was told that we speak a lot about Torah, but I'd like to basically start with the following. You know, anybody starts to learn, you start basically, Torah Shabbat Peh begins with Masechtas Brachas. And the Noach Tzlach at the end of Masechtas Brachas, the Samach Daled raises the question that why Masechtas Brachas is called Masechtas Brachas. You might realize the beginning of the Masechta Bechal does not discuss anything of Brachas. It discusses halachas of Kriya Shema, Nemes HaKodesh Shema Be'arvin. And as you continue on, we're still not discussing brachas. Actually, as you go on, what we're discussing is the halachas of tefillin. We don't reach anything regarding brachas until you get the case of Mevarachim, which is the Perek Shishi. So why would the Masechta be identified and be called Masechtas Brachas? Now, before we get to that, he also points out that the Tosfos Shonta brings down B'Sher the halachas gedolos when he started his sefer. He starts basically with no more, no less, just merely quoting Birchas HaTorah when you get up in the morning, and there is the bracha that you make, which is called Birchas HaTorah, and the Halachos Gedolos quotes that because to emphasize the very important point, which Chazal tell us in a number of places, that of the Or is what brought the Churban, because the Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila, because Yidden, before they learned, they did not say Birchas HaTorah. So the Halachos Gedolos therefore quotes the beginning of the Sefer. He says, don't make that mistake again. Make sure that before you learn that you say Birchas HaTorah, because we saw the tremendous tragedy that was brought about as a result that Yidden did not say Birchas HaTorah. And the obvious question would be, which always is bothersome, if somebody did not say Birchas HaTorah, but it is such a serious Aveira that is something that is the cause of the exile, that we are exiled, went into Golos because of the lack of saying Birchas HaTorah. As a matter of fact, according to the Rambam, it's not even a deraisa. Birchas HaTorah is only a drabonon. Does not mention it in the Tariq Mitzvahs, where the Rambam disagrees that Birchas HaTorah is a deraisa, which is really a problem with the Rambam, because, which we're not getting to that, but look in Brochus Chofal, the Gemara says, On Rav Yehuda Marav, Minayin leBirchas HaTorah, Lefaneo Min HaTorah, Shenema Kishem Hashem Ekro, Chovu Goydel Lekeinu, so it's a deraisa. And the Megillah Esther always tries to for the kashas of the Ramban against the Rambam. Here he throws up his hands. He says, it seems the Ramban is very right. That Birchas HaTorah is a deraisa. Without to get into that in my yeshiva, that's a terutzim for that too. But that's not what I want to get into, but just to point out that even if Birchas HaTorah is a deraisa, but being mevatel of mitzvah saseh, b'shev al taseh, by not doing anything, is such a serious aveira, bringing the cause of a churban. How do you understand that? Even Rabbi Say, even when you go in the Tarek mitzvahs, when the person's over in alav, some are skila, some are only malchus, and some are not even malchus. And here you have, certainly it's only a mitzvah saseh. Why would there be a churban? But the nekudas advar of this, we're speaking about b'chlal, when anybody who's involved in any type of learning, probably the most frustrating situation that any Ben Torah encounters, no matter what age, and that is the situation that there is a certain problem of trying to retain and trying to remember that which we learn. Because invariably what happens is, as we continue and we turn the pages and we go on from one blot to the other, we go from one section to the other, we find that we are lacking a lot of that which we might have learned in the past. Therefore, it's an amazing thing where the tzlach comes and says, I'm going to tell you a zgula nifloa. That's what he calls it, tremendous and amazing zgula. The tzlach is saying that. It's not the sefer zgula, it's the whole sefer, a different kind of zgula. It's not a sefer zgula, it's the tzlach. The tzlach says that every day in the morning when you get up, you should say, Birchas HaTorah b'kavona. You say Birchas HaTorah b'kavona, says the tzlach, it's a zgula nifloa to be able to remember and to retain that which you are learning. And the Tag goes on to explain it and says, on what basis am I saying that? There's the following. Now here again, you don't have to be a tremendous bucky in Tehillim, but probably the first parak in Tehillim most people remember, which begins, Ashrei Uish, Asher L'holach B'tzas Rishoyim, B'derech HaToyim Lo Yomad, Ki im b'Toyres Hashem Chefzo, he has a desire to learn Torah, and immediately it says, in his Torah, Yehega Yom V'Layla, he's involved with day and night. And the Gemara by the Zohar Yutes, Rav asks Stira, well, whose Torah is it? The pasuk begins, Ki b'Toyres Hashem Cheftzoi. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah, it's Torah Hashem. And then immediately, it says, Yehega Yom V'Layla, he's studying his own Torah. So the Gemara asks the question, well, whose Torah in fact is it? So the Gemara's lashon is the following. What does that mean? So Rashi says, means before a person learns, it's not your Torah, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah. Why should it be yours? You didn't study it yet. But after you have already studied, that Torah that you have studied, that is your Torah. And by the way, it's Medulik in the Pasuk, Hashem Cheftzoi. It's called Torah Hashem because you have a desire, as Mashra you didn't learn yet. You have a desire to learn. So then it's the Kodesh Baruch Hu's Torah. But once you have already learned, it becomes your Torah. This is how Rashi learns. By the way, Gaborch is very interesting is that the Safarov once said very interesting, you know, when a person has an aliyah, you have two brachas. You have a bracha before the aliyah, and then you have a bracha after the aliyah. But you know there's a difference. The first bracha you say, Asher Baruch Kolamim, we sort of like thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we express the fact that Baruch chose us above all the other nations. At the end we say, second bracha, we say, Asher Notzah Lonu Torah's Emes. We describe the Torah as being a Torah's Emes. It's not Stam a Torah. It's a true Torah, it's a Torah's Emes. Why in the first bracha we don't mention that the Torah is the Torah's Emes? For example, we should say, Asher Baruch Kolamim, the Notzah Lonu Torah's Emes. Why in the first bracha is not mentioned Torah's Emes? Why dafka in the second bracha? The Safarov says, push it. Before you're a Koyer b'Torah, before you read the Torah, whose Torah is it? It's a Kodesh Baruch Hu's Torah. Kodesh Baruch Hu's Torah does not need any ashkomas that it's a Torah Semes. After you read your Koyer b'Torah, now it's your Torah. Your Torah is not so push it's a Torah Semes. Although many people think, everybody thinks it's Torah Semes, it's not so push it. So therefore we make an emphasis that hopefully the Torah that we receive, that our Torah also, in fact, is a Torah Semes. But the Rebbe Tzlach says, he says, I have a different pshat in the Gemara regarding the question, whose Torah is it? Is it HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah? Or is it my Torah? Kan b'tchila, kan l'b'soif. And that parallels which we have in other Gemara in Brachas Lamed Hey, where the Gemara there discusses a very well-known question again. One posuk says, Hashem ha'aretz u'maloyo. That the entire earth and everything in it belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not mine. Then there's another pasuk that says the opposite. Hashemayim shemayim l'Hashem. The heavens belong to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But v'aretz nosam l'bnei Yodam. But the earth was given to us. So to whom does it belong to? Hashem ha'aretz u'maloyo. Well, familiar with the Gemara Teretz. Kan koidim brocha. Kan liyacha brocha. You take an apple. Before you make a bracha, it does not belong to you. It belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Once you make a bracha, then it belongs to you. So the Tzlach says the same thing. If you're asking the question, whose Torah is it? Is it Hashem's Torah or is it your Torah? Kam betchila, before you said Birchas HaTorah. That's how the Tzlach wrote Pshat in the Gemara, not like Rashi. Kam betchila means before you said Birchas HaTorah, it's not your Torah. It belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But Kam le'b'soif. B'soif means, but once you have said Birchas HaTorah, so now HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives the Torah to you. Now what do you gain by that? An amazing thing. It's a Gemara in Nedarim Lamed Ches. Again, if it would not be a Gemara, it would be impossible for us to believe that or to say anything like that. The Gemara tells us that the great Moshe Rabbeinu himself, B'tchila Moshe Rabbeinu loy metoiru mishakcha. Here is Gemara. In the beginning, Moshe Rabbeinu himself, when he was in Shemayim for the 40 days and 40 nights, he was studying Torah, he used to forget. Moshe Rabbeinu used to forget. Ad shenitloi b'matona, until HaKadosh Baruch Hu finally gave HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the Torah b'matona, he stopped forgetting. Shneimar, vayitein el Moshe kechaloitze ledaber vayitein. So what do you see from here, said the Tzlach? Because Baruch Hu gives you the Torah b'matona, then you don't forget. So being that when a person said Birchas HaTorah, so now it becomes your Torah. Before the bracha again, it was HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah. But now that you said Birchas HaTorah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives the Torah to you b'matona. It becomes yours. If it becomes yours, then you don't forget. What we saw about Moshe Rabbeinu. That is the stuff. That is the reason. That is the reason. That's the secret behind the great Segula Nifla of saying Birchas HaTorah. That a person will be zeicher to remember why he's learning, because when you say Birchas HaTorah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you the Torah b'matona. If you get it b'matona, then you don't forget. So the Tzlach says, and here's the punchline, you know why Masechtas Brachas is called Masechtas Brachas? Not because we're studying Hilchas Brachas. That's much later than Masechta. It's called Masechtas Brachas to remind you before learning to say Birchas HaTorah. And as far as like this, because Masechta Brachas is the first Masechta when you're beginning to study Torah Shabbal Peh. So being that the first Masechta, so Rabbeinu HaKodesh wanted right away to give you a Segula, that you're beginning to start, you're starting a career of learning. You're starting Torah Shabbal Peh. So right away Rabbeinu HaKodesh wanted to give you a Segula to be able to succeed, and to be able to have a Segula to remember what you're learning. So he called the first Masechta right away Brachas. Starting to learn Torah Shabbal Peh. I want to give you a Segula. I want to give you a Segula to be able to remember what you're learning. I'm calling you Masechtas Brachas. Al Shem Birchas HaTorah. That's what the Tzlach says. So if that's the case, then maybe now we have a new insight, I believe. Because I'll say again that the Churm Habayis came because they failed to say Birchas HaTorah. I don't think that it means is because of the Aveira. Because of the Aveira of not saying. It's an Aveira. It's not such a great Aveira. What it means is, Rabbi say, it's not the Aveira. But if they didn't say Birchas HaTorah, they did not have the Segula of the Tzlach. So the result was that they learned and they forgot. So Lamaita, that never was really Torah in Klal Yisrael. They learned it and they forgot. They learned and forgot it. There's nobody really who had Torah. Maybe he had a blot. Maybe he had a line of Gemara here. Maybe a line of Gemara there. If there's no Torah in Klal Yisrael, then there's no Beis Hamikdash. The whole Kedusha of the Beis Hamikdash is the fact you had the Orah in it, you had the Torah, you had the Menorah, which is that Poas HaTorah. The Gemara says in Bava Basra Chafei, he writes the Shiach Ki Miyadrim. You want to be a Chacham, go south. V'simonach Menorah Shebedar. You went to the Heichel, Menorah was on the left side. The Menorah was the source of Hashpoas HaTorah. Yeah, so you have to have Hashpoas HaTorah. You have to have Torah. If they didn't say Birchas HaTorah, then they didn't have this Gula of the Tzlach, so they were forgetting. So there's no existing Torah really in Klal Yisrael. And without Torah, we don't have anything. But I want to move on. I think that a little bit deeper, and this is a fundamentally aside, I think, in Jewish life. This applies to everyone, by the way. When the Slach says you say Birchas HaTorah, it's a zgula, I don't think it's just simply a magical formula. Just say it. I think there's something deeper here. You're familiar, the Gemara says, in Megillah Davov, the Gemara says, if a person says, Lo yogati motzosi al tam, and a person says that I did not toil, I did not put in effort, and I was matzliach in learning, don't believe it. It's not shaykh. Lo yogati motzosi al tam, and a person says it was not miyageya, I did not put in the time, did not put in the effort. Motzosi was matzliach, do not believe it. By the way, they used to ask Yeshayla, what do you mean don't believe him? It's a question of honest. Give him a faher, give him a test and see if he knows it or not. You have to believe him or not. You have to believe him, give him a faher. The answer is don't believe that lo yogati. Don't believe that he did not put in the time. But Reb Chaim Shmulevich, Rabbi Yisrael Rosh Yeshiva, said it totally from Pshat. There's some people who are very intelligent, they're very quick mind, fast thinking people. They don't need to put in too much time in learning. So what does the Gemara say? What does it mean, lo yogati matzotzi? If a person did not put in the time and the effort, don't believe it. Some people, Rabbi Yisrael, was very, very great Bali Kishuy, highly intelligent, great minds, have Shnella Tfisa. So why Al-Tamid? Chaim Shulei said the Gemara does not mean that Al-Tamid don't believe that he does not know the subject matter. How about it? Some people don't need a lot of time. They can learn very quickly. The Gemara Lashon does not say Al-Tamid don't believe that he knows it or not. He's able to know it. The word matzasi means, like the Gemara of Metzia that days, matzosi dosu liyoda mashra means to have a kinyan. Remember the Gemara, Ze'omer ani mitzosio, I found the Metzia, belongs to me. Ze'omer mitzosio. Chaim Shlovi says, when a person does not toil in Torah, does not have a kinyan in Torah. The Torah and him are two separate entities. But in order to have a kinyan in Torah, in order to you and the Torah to become like one, that is dafka through Yegiyah. Well, Yogati umatzosi, that is Al-Taman. You can't have the bechin of a matzosi to have a kinyan in Torah without Yegiyah. So let's go further. Then the Gemara says, most people know this part of Gemara, and even the next line also. Certainly people remember. Yogati matzosi, a person says, I did put in the time and the effort. Matzosi now was matzliach, tam, and believe him. Now comes two lines of Gemara. This is might be some surprising to some people. Hanamila, the Gemara says, when a person says, Yogati matzosi, that I toiled, now matzliach, believe him, Hanamila chidude. Meaning is, in order to know the subject matter, yeah, you put in the time and the effort, he'll know it. Avo, however, Lo'oik megirsa siyata dishmaya, says Rashi, but in the order lo'oik megirsa, what does that mean? Says Rashi, shlo yishkach. In order not to forget, to be able to retain, the Gemara says siyata dishmaya, hafel v'feler. The Gemara says, Yegiyah will not guarantee that you will remember what you are learning. So says the Gemara. Yogati matzotzi tamin hanamilu l'chidude. Chidude. To understand the subject matter, that's fine. But la'oik megirsa, in order to retain and to remember shlo yishkach, for that you need siyata dishmaya. Comes Rabbi Yisrael some Sefer and says, why do you need siyata dishmaya in order shlo yishkach? Chazer, review. 5 times, not enough? 10 times. What about mei pom mevecho, like the Gemara discusses sometimes? So keep reviewing as much as you need. Why do you have to have siyata dishmaya? Point to kasha. Shlo yishkach, the Gemara says, Yegiyah does not help. You have to have siyata dishmaya. Why do you have to have siyata dishmaya for that? Sefer says an amazing thing. Whoever told you that when you review something you remember? You realize that all of us in our private lives, before we had all these gadgets, we had to remember things. Now you don't have to remember anything. Give a press of a button. If you want to remember something, you realize that if you review it enough times, you'll remember. You have to remember certain calendar dates. You have to remember certain telephone numbers. You realize if you reviewed it enough times, you remember. Or those of us maybe remember we had to memorize a poem. If you reviewed it enough times, some people 10 times, some people 20 times, remember. Says some Sefer Dover Nifle, the The natural fact, or the scientific fact to remember what to review, is only Gashmi secular information. Because the mind of a person is flesh and blood. It's a Gashmi is the Gemoyach, and therefore being that it's a Gashmi the Gemoyach, we are Basar Badam, and therefore we can absorb by reviewing Gashmi information. But remember, Torah is some Sofer, Torah is Chochmas Hashem, it's spiritual information. It's Chochmas Hashem. Chochmas Hashem with a Gashmi the Gekob does not connect. They cannot live side by side b'derech hateva. And therefore to remember Torah, Sedach Sam Sofer, b'derech hateva, you can review it 1,000 times, you will not remember. But the fact is we do. Siyata Dishmaya. That's why. It's not a natural phenomenon that review over and over again when it comes to Torah that it has to be effective. Reviewing something, chazering over something, over and over again, according to nature, to remember it. As remember, it says things which are gashmi, which are not spiritual matters. In order to remember spiritual matters, what they said with the gashmi, they go to physical mind. Physical mind, gashmis and ruchnius don't jive. They're not homogeneous. They cannot coexist side by side. They're contradictory properties. So therefore, even if you would review, no matter how many times, you would not remember. But the fact is we do. It's Siyata Dishmaya. That's the Siyata Dishmaya. But already the Belzerov once said, the Alta Belzerov once said, Chazara, he said, is a zgula to remember. It's a zgula to remember. It states of Mitzias to remember. It's a zgula to remember. I'll give you an example. When we're healthy and well, we're able to use the facilities. Of course, we make the bracha. We say Asher Yotzar. How do we conclude that bracha? Conclude by saying, HaKadosh Baruch Hu heals all flesh and does wondrous things. Mafli lasos. What is the definition? And we say this, hopefully many, many times we're able to say it. We've said it hundreds of times. What is the mafli lasos? What area are we referring to that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does wondrous things? Well, on the surface, I would say it's very poshut. Every part of the human body is tremendous. It's tremendous, extremely. The design, the way a limb, how much goes into an eye, and certainly the brain, any aver, the bloodstream, everything works. It's tremendous. It's mafilasas, it's a pillar. The whole design of the human body is very wondrous. But Ramah Shulchan Aruch does not touch that way. Ramah involves, Ramah says, what mafilasas means? In order to survive, because Baruch Hu gave each and every one of us, the neshama comes out of the shemayim. The neshama comes on the kisakov. The neshama is purely, fully, completely spiritual. Our bodies are physical. But the Hateva says the Ramah, a neshama and a guf should not be able to live side by side. To be like contradict, like you have two opposite forces, one pushing out the other. You're not able to live. And yet it does. Ramah said that's the mafli lasos. That is the pillar that ruchnis and gashmis are able to coexist side by side. That exactly coincides with what some Sofer is saying. In order to remember Torah, which is ruchnis, b'derech hateva does not fit into a physical mind, because ruchnis and gashmis do not coexist one with the other. B'derech hateva. Right v'chol basar mafli lasos. But the great Balamutzer, the Alta from Kelm, once he said, in the world of Shatchonas, there are different levels of Shatchonim. There are better Shatchonim, there are schwacher Shatchonim. But he says the schwachste Shatchon, right? The most unsuccessful Shatchon would never occur to him to make a shidduch, he says, to the human being and a behemoth. Can't make such a shidduch. And here came HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a shidduch between a neshama and a guf. I don't understand that shidduch. I don't understand that shidduch. That's a gewaltige chiddush. That the Rav Chol Basar are mafli lasos. The fact that the Gashmis and Ruchnias are able to live side by side, that is the chiddush. If you take a look at the Choyves Alvadas, it says in Shar Cheshbon HaNefesh. You said that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us, there's Olam Hazeh, which is this world, and there's Olam Haba. Choyves Alvadas says you can't have both. If it's Olam Hazeh you want to live a life and enjoy the pleasures of Olam Hazeh and take it all in, you have to be ready to give up a chelik in Olam Haba. And if it's Olam Haba that you want, then you have to be mevater and you have to give up a chelik of Olam Hazeh. You can't have both. You have to make the choice. If it's Olam Hazeh that you want, be ready to give up a chelik of Olam Haba. If it's Olam Haba that you want, you have to give up a chelik of Olam Hazeh. And therefore, so being that, the whole idea, the whole avodah of a person, as we see, is it's a tremendous chiddush to be able to have the ruchnius and gashmius let's go side by side. So now, what is Birkas HaTorah, Rabbi Isai? It's Kedai wants to take a look. Once, what the Bach says on the tour in Arachaim in Hilchas Birkas HaShachar, in Siman Mem Zayin, I'll read you one line. The Bach tells us what is the kavanah when we say Birkas HaTorah. The Bach says the following lashon. When he says in the morning, he says, Asher b'charbonim v'kolamim, you chose us over all the nations. V'notzan lonu v'toirotza, and you gave us the Torah. What was the purpose? It says about the purpose of Torah is not simply to study Torah. Avada, you have to. Not enough. The purpose of Torah is not only to do mitzvahs. Avada, not enough. You know what it is? You know what the ultimate tachlis? Here comes the Lashon Habach. V'notzan lonu v'toirotza, shenis'atzem b'kedushas HaTorah, that we should become a Sefer Torah. That, Rabbi said, this is the avodah. You live your life where you transform your physical nature to become more spiritual. And that is that we actually are able to become, a Yid is able to become a virtual Sefer Torah. And if you think back and say, really? You expect us mortal beings, we should become a Sefer Torah? Is that really possible? Well, here comes the world of Chassidus, comes Rebbe Binim of Pshischa. And he said, did you ever stop to think, what is a Sefer Torah? What's a Sefer Torah? Well, a Sefer Torah, you realize, is you take the skin of the behemoth, take the ore, you take the hide of the behemoth, and then you take some droplets of ink, and you write words of Sefer Torah on the skin of a behemoth. You write enough, and it becomes transformed in the Kedusha of the Sefer Torah. Said the Rebbe Rabbinim, he says, if or behemoth can become a Sefer Torah, or Oelbaum cannot become a Sefer Torah, a person who lives Torah, a person who breathes Torah, who lives the life of Torah, he's less than an animal. An animal can become a Sefer Torah. That's what a Sefer Torah is. So that's what the Bach means. That's what the Bach is saying. Shenis'atzem b'kedushas HaTorah. The tachlis of the Torah was given to us that ultimately we live our lives in a way that we become spiritual beings. That we become transformed to becoming a virtual Sefer Torah. As a matter of fact, Nishal Teshuvas Be'er Moshe from the Debrecen Road, he brings down that one of the great Gedolei Yisrael, very close to Chassam Sofer, we had many, of course all Gedolei Yisrael had reverence and covet one for the other. There was another God, I said many, many times that they were Gedolei Yisrael during their lifetime, in the late 1700s or in the 1800s, that when they were alive, they shook the world. They were pillars of the world. As time goes on and on and on, that they are forgotten. They are forgotten. And I'm talking about even B'nai Torah. Simply, time has gone on, and we move on, and we don't remember, certainly not aware, unless we open up, the chuvas of the G'dai Achrayim. For example, there's another G'dai by the name of Reb David Deitch. David Deitch was a Rav in a place called Neustadt. And David Deitch, if you open chuvas Noida B'Yehuda, you'll be hard-pressed to find another Gadol that receives greater titles from the Noida B'Yehuda as Reb David Deitch. Tremendous goyim. Very close friends with the Chassam Sofer. For example, Yeshuva Chassam Sofer, Kuf Chaf Aleph in Arachaim, he brings down a kasha, he says, Hiksha Odom Kosher Kibarzo. Someone tough as iron, a steel. Hagoyin Reb David Deitch. So the Chavos Yeshuva Be'er Moshe brings down that Reb David Deitch came to Preshburg once, which is the city of Chassam Sofer, and it was early morning, and there was no place for him to go, so he had no problem. He goes into the Beis Medrash, which is open. He doesn't need a bed. Didn't sleep anyway. Two many hours in the bed anyway, even at home. He goes down, lies himself down on the floor, he has no problem. Some Sofer happened to come a little bit earlier than usual in the Beis Medrash. You see there's a Yid lying on the floor. He had no idea what that Yid is. And he sees that this is Reb David Aish. So he cries out, Reb David Aish, Sefer Torah shenafel lekarkein with geyser tainus. Quoting you, shouts the Chuvas Ber Moshe. Sefer Torah, we know, Chaz v'Sholem fall down to the ground, we know. You have to fast. Here you have some Sefer sees Reb David Aish on the ground. Sefer Torah shenafel lekarkein. We see how a person's able to reach a madrega that he himself actually becomes incorporated and encapsulates. He becomes a shtik, a chayfetz of the Sefer Torah. Now speaking of David Aish already, let me tell you something else. David Aish had many chumras in his life. Again, pointing out to the tzidkis. Among the many chumras that he had was that before he did any mitzvah, he was able very quickly to review all the halachas regarding that particular mitzvah. For example, before washing hands for Netilas Yadayim for bread, you would be able to review very quickly the halachas of Netilas Yadayim. By the way, it said something about the stipler, as always had been said, when smoking was still okay, going back years ago, when it was not yet known that it's dangerous. Many Rabbanim used to smoke, many Rosh Yeshivas. I still remember used to do a lot of smoking. Talking about the late 50s, early 60s. A lot of smoking, very common. When the news came out, medical reports that it's dangerous. Stipler was also a smoker. Yeah, Stipler used to smoke. But now he realized he has to stop smoking. It's not so easy when it sort of becomes like a stickle addiction. So Stipler therefore made a following Kabbalah, what he said like this. Whenever I have an urge to smoke, so before I smoke, he made a Kabbalah, they have to learn 2 blat in Masechtas Nedarim. 2 blat. So at least he's going to be able to delay or think twice before smoking, because now he has to learn 2 blat. The Stipler says, everybody thinks I'm a masmid. Didn't realize I really want to smoke. So this is Reb David Aish. David Aish, one of the chumras also is that for Netilas Yadayim, you didn't have no sinks like today, so you had to shep water, draw water from a well. His chumra was, there has to be a Yid. It was a non-Jew that shept the water, drew the water, he would not use it. Well, in Yonenu is like this. What's in the Negaya to say there's another chumrah that he had. He would never eat any bread unless he himself inspected the flour or sifted the flour to make sure there's no taloim, there's no infestation of bugs. That was his chumrah. He wouldn't trust anybody. Now here Hayoim, he comes to visit the Chassam Sofer, and Chassam Sofer puts 2 rolls on the table. And Chassam Sofer knew about the chumras of David Aish, so the Chassam Sofer says to him, I want you to know that I myself appointed 2 choshev bachrim that I trust implicitly, Yerushalayim, Erlich bachrim. They checked it out, and I can tell you, guarantee you, there's nothing here, nothing to worry about. But Meister of David Aish had a personal chumrah, though, maybe the time, sof kol sof, he does not, but Mishum Kvoidei Shel Chassam Sofer, he was ready to bend. He's going to eat the rolls. Sofer was machabed. What do you do? So he picks up one of the rolls, Rabbi Isai, and 2 little worms crawl out. And some Sofer says, on the Mammon Bemunah Shalema, there were no worms there. Because Baruch who put it in there, the Dodai should not have to change his minute. Let's give you an idea of what we're talking about here. Sefer Torah shenafel lekarkein. Well, Rabbi Chana Basman used to relate regarding the Netziv. Netziv of Elojim was carrying a Sefer Torah. You have to hear. As he's walking down, and he slips, and the Netziv, the great Netziv of Elojim, falls down to the ground, and the Sefer Torah falls down to the ground. So everyone very quickly is running to pick up the Sefer Torah, and Rabbi Itzel of Elojim calls out, no, first you pick up the Netziv, the living Sefer Torah, then you pick up the other Sefer Torah. First you pick up the Netziv. This is the living Sefer Torah. That's what the Bach is talking about. Shenis atzim b'kedushas haTorah. That's the idea of Birchas haTorah, to teach us that what we have to do is to try to transform ourselves in order to become each and every day, to become closer to becoming a virtual Sefer Torah. Ruchnius has no end. Beyond time, beyond space. There's no end to how much spiritual we are able to become. Continue to grow and more and more. And therefore you take Reb Tzadok HaKohen and Sefer Pitzadik. Yidam B'Shem the Choiz of Lublin. He brings down this amazing thing. He said there was this Talmud Chacham that was an Oni V'Evian, very, very poor. Well, you can imagine he had very little to eat, and yet for some reason he was quite stout. He was on the heavy side. And people could not understand. People could not understand. The klal is, if you don't eat, you don't gain weight. Even though all these people have all different excuses. It's a cell problem, it's this kind of a problem, it's a hormone problem. But you're the klal, if you don't eat that klal, you don't gain weight. They said nobody in the Holocaust actually was overweight because of a hormone problem. So the problem, so the thing is like this. So here you have this Talmud Chacham, who again had very little to eat, and yet he was on the heavy side. And the Choyzim Oelbaum said the following, and again I'm quoting to you this Reb Tzadok HaKohen, you can find it in Parshas Emor. Reb Tzadok HaKohen Oelbaum says, listen, the average person, right, you eat one slice of bread, maybe you gain a little bit of weight. 2 slices of bread, piece of cake, you gain more. The more you eat, the more you gain. This Talmud Chacham, every taisus he puts into his body, he gains weight. Even the Torah is the one. Every blood Gemara that he learns, he says, has an effect on his body. It's shayach, such a musig, it's shayach, such a concept that a person becomes a chefs of the Sefer Torah. Him and the Sefer Torah become one. And that is therefore, so going back now to the tzlach. The Tzach tells us that these gula, again, Shikras HaTorah is Birchas HaTorah. What the Tzach means to say is when you say Birchas HaTorah, you're not just saying it. What is the message? The message is it's telling you that the tachlit you're getting up in the morning should is atzim b'kedushas HaTorah. It's telling you on how you should start your day. In the morning, the first thing you say, Birchas HaTorah, remember, what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu want from us? I'm starting a new day. It doesn't make a difference what yesterday was. I'm starting now a new day, and I say again, Birchas HaTorah. And I'm reminded, Shidis Atzim B'Kedushas HaTorah. If we become more spiritual, then Avada we're going to remember. Because then we have no contradiction. What did some Sofer tell us? The problem against remembering or forgetting is because Ruchnis and Gashmis, Rabbi Isai, can't coexist. But if you yourself become more spiritual, then there's no stira between the Chochmas HaTorah, which is spiritual, and you. You and the Torah become one. So the message is, Birchas HaTorah, Rabbi Isai, is to change your life. That's the message of Birchas HaTorah. To be able to understand what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu want from us as a result of giving us the Torah. So the idea is, Atzim B'Kedushas HaTorah, that is the message. And therefore it means that our lives can no longer be the same as it was till now. To give up a little bit of Olam Hazeh and to connect a little more with Olam Haba, and the more spiritual beings that we become, less contradiction between the Chochmas HaTorah and the physical guf, Avada and Avada. We'll be able to connect, we'll be able to remember. Because Baruch Hu gives the Siyata D'Shmaya with Hashem. We should be able to go Machayil al Chayil. And then to become transformed. Become virtually, to become connected, to become a Chetz of the Sefer Torah. And then, Avada and Avada will certainly be Zoicher to Kol HaBrocha Yisamurit B'Torah, as we say in the Hadron of the Masechta, or Ichyonim B'Yamino, B'Smoilo Isha B'Kovah, B'Tzimcha B'Nachas, Sheva Brocha Tzlocha B'Yas HaGoyel B'Mheru B'Menu. Amen.
Amen.